Rock climbing is a sport that puts fear to good use. Fear brings focus. For avid climbers, clearing their minds of distractions is a life-saving imperative. The risks and the rewards are tremendous. Scaling 1,000 feet brings an unparalleled sense of freedom and personal accomplishment, and the views aren't half bad either.
I went to a bachelor party of a really good friend of mine, and he said, look, instead of going to a strip bar, we're gonna go to this rock climbing place outside and just give it a go.
Growing up in eastern Pennsylvania, the outdoors was a big part of Craig DeMartino's boyhood. But Craig had never tried rock climbing.
Kind of thought I was afraid of heights, and I wasn't sure about that, and so when I tied in that very first time, I had this nervousness, but this anticipation of this is something cool, I want to see what this is about. And it immediately it resonated with my soul from that very first day.
Before long, Craig was climbing constantly. Climbing put Craig in a position to explore his other passion, photography.
You're in these weird areas where not a lot of people can be, so you start taking pictures, and those two things integrate really well.
After a few years of scaling the scrappy cliffs and crags of eastern Pennsylvania, Craig felt ready for bigger challenges and grander vistas.
I packed my stuff up, moved to Colorado so that I could climb more and just be in the mountains.
In Fort Collins, Craig met Cindy, and the two hit it off.
I love being outside with my friends and my family, and I love the movement and challenge that climbing presents for me. We actually just started climbing together. He was a really safe and reliable partner.
A reliable partner is as critical to a safe climb as the right shoes, the right rope, and the rack of cams, nuts, and carabiners that climbers carry.
I was actually afraid to ask her out. I thought, man, if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna lose a really good climbing partner.
18 months later, Craig and Cindy married. In a couple years, they had 2 children. Craig was working as a staff photographer for a Colorado publisher, while Cindy studied for a degree in wildlife biology, and they both climbed as much as they could, with each other and with friends. On July 21st, 2002, Craig and his good friend Steve met up for a day of climbing in the Rocky Mountain National Park.
I'm gonna go up to Drake Monastery, do some sport climbing.
We can go up to Estes. There's this fun route I know called White Man.
Okay.
They set their sights on a particular 1,000-foot-high granite egg called Sundance Buttress.
Steve and I decided that I would go first, I would lead the climb.
That's it?
Yeah, finally.
And so I'm gonna put the gear in.
Climbs are rated on a scale of difficulty called the Yosemite Decimal System.
So you ready to lead it?
This route is 511C.
I'll know when I'm on it, huh?
So it has a difficulty rating, and then it has a rating for putting gear in. It's a 511C, but then it's an R, which means it's a very serious climb, which means it's hard to put gear into. You're gonna have to really look around. The old days, they used to pound pitons in. Now we use cams. They cam against the rock, and so the rope is running into these devices as you're going up the rock.
Knowing where to place the cams is critical. A climber must judge the distance up against the length of rope out. If he climbs 10 feet above the cam and he falls, it will be 20 feet down.
If I fall 20 feet, now you have to assess, what am I gonna hit? Is that piece gonna stay in the rock? If it pulls, where am I gonna go to?
Craig began his zigzag across the rock. The granite face was fairly smooth, with only a few narrow cracks and folds for wedging in the small safety gear.
This climb, for probably 50 feet, was all small gear. Climbers don't like small gear, we like big gear. Small gear tends to pull out.
Craig headed toward the first anchor bolt, a steel pin at nearly 100 feet. Getting to that safe spot required a tricky maneuver called a traverse.
When you traverse, you always run that risk of doing a pendulum. When you swing from this point, you're gonna hit wherever you left.
Steve is down below, holding on to the safety rope tied into Craig's harness.
Once I was at the anchor, you get that, okay, I'm still alive and happy.
Craig clipped the harness into the anchor bolt.
I'm at this anchor that is 100 feet off the ground, basically a 10-story office building.
Off belay! Okay, nice job! Belay's off!
The climber's sight line was blocked by the cliff.
Now I'm safe. I'm clipped into the rock. The route is over for me, and I'm ready to be lowered to the ground.
Craig shouted down to Steve.
So you, okay?
I unclipped my harness and just sat back.
The rope was unsecured.
I am really picking up a lot of speed.
No!
Craig hits a tree that stands him upright.
I'm going the whole way.
He's plowed into the ground at about 50 miles per hour. In the lingo of climbers, Craig has just cratered.
Couldn't get my head around the fact that I was on the ground. And not that I was hurt, but just that I was on the ground where I shouldn't be. I should be, 100 feet in the air, and then suddenly the pain hit like a freight train.
Steve rushed over to find his friend in a pool of blood.
Stay with me, Craig. You're gonna be okay. Let me support your head a little bit.
Shattered bones sticking out from all over his legs.
You're gonna be okay, Craig. Be right back.
Steve can't tell how badly Craig is hurt, but he does know Craig will be facing the fight of his life to survive. Climber Craig DeMartino was 100 feet up the granite face of a Colorado cliff. Then, in the blink of an eye, he crashed to the ground. He can't move his head or sit up or see the pool of blood growing around him.
I wasn't thinking about death at that moment. I was thinking about this amazing fear I had of not having any control over the situation as it was happening.
Craig!
Craig's climbing buddy Steve had scrambled over the loose boulders to find Craig conscious,
You're gonna be okay, buddy.
but in a mangled heap.
Steve is looking at this pile. What the heck just happened?
Hang in there, buddy.
How do you even begin to deal with this? He doesn't know that my back's broken or my neck is broken,
Hey, stay with me. You're gonna be okay.
but he knows you can't fall 100 feet and not damage your insides.
No!
Neither are clear about why Craig fell.
No, you!
Perhaps a miscommunication or mistaken assumption. In any case, Steve knew the priority
We're gonna slow the bleeding on this.
was now to stop the bleeding.
You with me, Craig? Stay with me, buddy.
He put a tourniquet on my right leg to kind of slow the bleeding. We're 4 miles in the backcountry. Nobody knows we're here. What do we do?
I'm gonna run to Estes and get help, okay? I'll be right back. My cell phone.
Steve dug into his climbing bag for his cell phone.
We're next to a 1,000-foot granite cliff in the backcountry. He not only gets a cell signal, dials 911.
My buddy fell to the ground from white man. We're climbing Sundance Buttress.
Gets pushed right through to Rocky Mountain Rescue.
Yeah, Steve. Okay, we'll look for you on the trail.
And the guy who is on call there, Eric
Hey,
Gabriel,
They're coming, Craig.
is not only the head of Rocky Mountain Rescue, he's a climber.
As Eric made his way to Craig and Steve, he alerted other rescue team members to join him.
Hey, it's Eric Gabriel. We have a fallen climber at the bottom of the Sundance Buttress. I'm on the way up flagging the route.
I had Eric at my side probably within 40 minutes of hitting the ground, which is unheard of in the backcountry.
Paramedic. You out here, okay? What happened? Check you out here and see if you're hurt anywhere else, okay? You let me know.
There is a quote in climbing that if you fall 10 feet, you have a 10% chance of dying. If you fall 20 feet, you have a 20% chance of dying. I just came 100 feet, so you can do the math.
Steve and Eric knew that Craig's situation was worse than Craig thought.
Married? Hey, you want us to call your wife?
Eric asked me if I wanted him to call my wife Cindy.
No.
I thought that was a bad idea. I just thought, okay, I don't want her to worry. But then, shortly after that,
Sure you don't want us to call your wife?
I must be hurt bad.
Okay.
Maybe I should call Cindy.
Cindy?
Hello?
It's Steve.
Oh, hi, Steve.
Steve said that Craig had taken a fall
What happened?
and that he had broken his ankles.
No, he's gonna be okay.
And I thought that he had just fallen
All right.
to the end of the rope and maybe hit his feet on the, on the face.
I'm on my way.
So I didn't know that Craig had actually hit the ground. And I didn't go beyond that in my head. I just wanted to get there and see for myself.
Eric did his best to stabilize Craig's injuries and packaged him for a difficult, bumpy rescue.
It'll be okay, Craig.
Called a carryout. The rescue team prepared an elaborate system of ropes and pulleys to move Craig down the mountain quickly and safely.
When I first saw Craig, I didn't know how badly injured he was. Eric pretty much said to me, you know, you can talk to Craig, but make it quick. I went up to Craig and I said, you know, I love you and I'm right here, but I'm gonna step out of the way because I want these guys to get you out of here.
She's looking at me and realizing my husband can die. And I'm looking at her, and that suddenly became very clear that I'm not gonna get up, that I'm not gonna walk away from it. This is gonna maybe kill me. This is really serious, and I don't know how this will end.
It took the rescue team nearly 5 hours to bring Craig to a clearing in the valley. From there, they loaded him aboard a waiting helicopter and flew him to the hospital in Fort Collins.
Hi, I'm Craig DeMartino, looking for my husband, Craig.
Craig was in surgery and they brought in a grief counselor. And I thought to myself, why is there a grief counselor here? You know, I don't need a grief counselor. I still wasn't really aware of how seriously injured Craig was. Later in the evening, when we were waiting for Craig to come out of surgery, his neurosurgeon came out. He said, you know, we really just need to see how Craig makes it through the hour.
The hour?
He wasn't expecting Craig to make it. To hear Craig might die is a really difficult thing to hear as a spouse.
Craig's neck was broken clean through. Broken ribs punctured his lung. His back was broken, and pieces of his shattered vertebra lodged in his spinal canal. He had a large hematoma in his chest and contusions on his kidneys, liver, and heart. With bolts, rods, and pins, surgeons do what they can. His feet and ankles were shattered.
They moved me to intensive care, put me on a ventilator because I couldn't breathe on my own. And my wife, Cindy, ended up sitting with me as I was unconscious for the entire night just to see if I was going to live through the night.
July 22, 2002. Cindy DeMartino waited in a Fort Collins hospital for word about her husband, Craig. Just 24 hours earlier, he had been scaling a 1,000-foot granite cliff. Now, after a long night in surgery, he was fighting for his life.
I spoke to his surgeon, and he said, well, he made it through the night, but we really didn't know what that was going to look like. We didn't know if he was going to be a paraplegic or if he was going to be a double amputee. We just knew that he survived the night.
As days stretched into weeks, Craig's condition stabilized.
Cindy was there all the time, and I would ask, you know, what's going on with my feet? What's going on with my back? What's going on with my neck? And what I didn't realize was they're being vague on purpose. What they're telling Cindy is, you know, he's probably going to be a paraplegic, probably a quadriplegic, one of the two. His spine was shattered. He doesn't have any movement.
Right after Craig's accident, in the weeks following, was a very scary time. What's his life gonna look like? What's his reaction gonna be? How are we gonna handle this? And then how are we gonna provide for our family financially? Our kids were really young.
You get to see your daddy? Isn't that fun?
Look at him taking
Hi, over there. Do you guys get to visit your dad every day? That's so much fun, huh?
Craig's feet had been shattered and now rebuilt with pins and screws, but there was no way to be sure if he would walk again until he started physical therapy. So he began what climbers call a sufferfest.
I've got rods in my back.
Your back is it? No.
Plates, screws, every time you move, all this scar tissue's cracking and breaking. I got in this process. You wake up, you do physical therapy, you feel like you're gonna die.
I don't even think soccer players can do that one.
You're in this constant cycle of just horrific pain. You pass out, you eat dinner, you go to bed, and that's your whole world.
You get to see me fall today. That'll be fun.
How do I survive the pain that I'm in?
Tired. Thank you.
He knew that the only way that he was gonna do that was for him to sit down and do the work.
Just going forward, just walking forward is insanely hard. You know, I gotta do it on crutches and it's just insanely hard. I hate that exercise.
Craig Craig has an amazing positive attitude, and he was able to look at himself and laugh.
This is gonna make people think therapy's fun.
You keep smiling.
I would sit in doctor's office when they were giving me these really bad reports, and I would just start making jokes. Broken back thing has a lot of drawbacks that they don't talk to you about before you do it. So if you're thinking about it, I wouldn't do it. I could focus on the negative of it, but I'm gonna focus on the positive of it.
Some days I would get there and he would say, hey, you know, I walked today. And then other days, you know, weren't as productive. So it was a slow process and it wasn't an easy process.
This is Mr. No Feeling.
Still not on the bottom though, huh?
My feet were still messed up, and they're still talking to me about, you know, your right leg is not healing. That is very problematic. I developed a nerve disorder 6 months after the accident called reflective sympathetic dystrophy. And I remember this neurosurgeon telling me, you're probably gonna be in a wheelchair full time, just so you know. It's just really hard to balance on it, and it kind of hurts.
The nerve disorder caused excruciating pain in his right leg, and the fragments of bone in his right foot weren't knitting together well enough to ever provide a stable walk. It seemed like Craig was destined for a wheelchair.
He didn't want to sit on the couch for the rest of his life. He wanted to be out taking pictures and doing his job and feeling like a person who's contributing to society. He wanted to live his life.
A year and a half later, Craig went back into surgery, this time to surrender a limb, to win back his life.
I lay down, and the next thing I know, I wake up, look down, and this side of the bed, there's foot sticking up, and on this side, it's flat. Okay, I've just stepped into a whole new world.
That's not hurting your back, is it?
No.
Craig DeMartino fought hard to survive a near-fatal climbing accident. He even gave up a leg in the hope of being able to once again pursue his passion.
They fit you with a prosthesis, and the first prosthesis is extremely painful. You have to learn a new center of balance because your body is made so that it's perfectly in balance. Well, all of a sudden you cut a leg off, now you're out of balance.
But a normal prosthetic foot just isn't designed for Craig's lifestyle. To figure what's best for him, Craig went to Joe Johnston of Quorum Prosthetics.
It does it, it's one, exactly. It does it, it's just not. So how much are you gonna cut off of that?
I'm probably gonna take about a ½ inch off both sides.
Joe designed an effective walking foot.
Everybody thinks carbon fiber is indestructible, but it's not.
And worked on early prototypes of a climbing model. Craig then called on the TRS company to build him a prosthetic foot crafted to endure the rigors of climbing, while Evolve developed a special climbing shoe. The man-made foot functioned well in the lab, but before it could prove its worth in a real climb, Craig himself needed to prove something first. His chance came on a camping trip as he helped his young daughter finish a climb.
I was belaying Maya, and as I lowered her back to the ground, she just very innocently looked at me and said,
"Are you gonna climb?"
He was like,
I don't know.
You know, kind of put the seed in his mind, and he thought, yeah, I'm gonna climb this too.
I was terrified. Every move was just pure, I'm gonna die. The rope's gonna explode, this cliff's gonna tip over. I mean, all these things are running through your head, and I get to the anchor, which was like what I had fallen from. The last thing I had seen at a climbing area was something very similar to that. And I'm looking at this anchor going, oh man, this is not where I wanna be. I just sat there, and I wouldn't let go. You know, 10 minutes later, probably, I'm thinking to myself, well, it was nice to tie in again. It was nice to be moving again, and that process just repeated itself over the next year.
Craig continued to rebuild his confidence and hone his skills with the prosthetic foot. Then in June of 2006, 4 years after his accident, Craig gets a remarkable invite from a legend in the world of climbers, Hans Florian.
He said, well, look, why don't you come out to the valley, that's what climbers call Yosemite, and we'll climb El Cap together. And that's like going to play basketball with Michael Jordan. As an afterthought, he's like, and you should do it in a day because no amputees have done it in a day. And I was like, okay.
El Cap, El Capitan. a 3,100-foot vertical wall, and one of the longest rock climbs in North America. El Cap is the yardstick by which climbers measure themselves.
I was thrilled that he wanted to do it, and I was thrilled that he was going to have the opportunity to go try again. But then on the other hand, I was a little scared.
To complete the climb in one day, Hans and Craig must start before sunrise.
I was thinking, oh man, this might have been a mistake. But then once we started climbing and moving, you're just doing the process and enjoying it.
People who were disabled were looking at him going, who's this disabled guy who's climbing El Cap?
When I completed that climb in 14 hours, that made me the first amputee to ever climb El Capitan in a day. Okay, so if we could do that, if I could finish that, what else does this look like?
Put the end closest to you.
I always felt like God had a plan in my life. All of a sudden, it was just very obvious that this plan was unfolding, and I just had to kind of step through the doors that were open for me. For me, my attitude towards the accident has always been, it is a big, defining piece of me, but it is not who I am, and I don't ever want it to be. I don't ever want people to say, oh, yeah, you were in that really horrific accident, that's a bummer. I want them to look at it and go, oh, you were in that horrific accident and you moved on, you moved forward.
Hi, I'm Craig DeMartino. Here's a question. When does something we love doing, something we live for, suddenly become something we might end up dying for? That's a question Ted Porter never expected to have to answer. That is until one quiet September day when he went out for a hike in Glacier National Park.
Glacier National Park in Montana is one of the jewels in the U.S. park system, with 1 million acres and over 700 miles of trails. Ted Porter has been coming here as long as he can remember.
It's been kind of in our family for years and years, you know? Just going to Glacier National Park and enjoying the scenery and the camaraderie together, and it's close-knit family time, and it's a beautiful place to spend time, for sure.
Continuing the family tradition, the Porters decided to meet up for another Labor Day weekend to hike together for a few days.
Well, usually after my parents leave, I spend 2 to 3 days by myself. Spending time alone is something that I really enjoy doing. Especially in the backcountry. You can go at your own pace, you can do what you want to do. You don't have to answer to anybody. You don't have any curfews. It's dangerous. It's exciting. It's fun.
Among the star attractions in the park are the glaciers. There are 25 remaining, but sadly, scientists now believe that all may disappear by 2030 because of current climate patterns.
My plan was to climb Mount Jackson, which is one of the 6 peaks over 10,000 feet in Glacier Park. And also to see the Jackson Glacier, because there aren't too many glaciers left in Glacier National Park, and the Jackson Glacier is one of the bigger ones, so I wanted to see that before it disappeared. And I knew if I climbed fast or hiked fast that I'd be able to easily do it in a day.
Ted got off to a later start than he originally planned, but the first part of the hike was 6 miles and flat, and he made good time.
So the next phase was the extremely steep trail up to the Jackson Glacier. It was just really direct. Went right up through the trees, which I'd never taken before. Damp, slick, muddy. Not the most ideal trail to be taking.
Then he saw it.
The whole Jackson Glacier was sprawled out in front of me, which is pretty impressive. It was a beautiful sight to behold. And I was the only one up there. Didn't see anybody. Just me and the glacier.
He strapped on his crampons and forged ahead. A recent rain had made the ice even slicker, but he made it across the entire glacier. By now, Ted could feel the chilly air coming off the ice. He had dressed lightly, underestimating how cold it would be on the glacier.
I kind of looked at the mountain and figured out what I thought was going to be the easiest way to climb it. There were crevasses to my immediate right, which cut off my route to the right. I saw a rock rib on the far side of the glacier that looked like it led to the very top of Mount Jackson. So that was my destination.
Okay, so I just came across the whole glacier. Some amazing ice fall. A huge crevasse right there. Trying to figure out how to go to that rock rib and make it to the top.
Oh yeah. But feeling good. It's not very hard, it's pretty easy actually, but.
Another day, beautiful glacier.
He hopped off the glacier onto the rock rib and removed his crampons.
The rock was really becoming slick, and so at this point it was real slow going. And what I found was just a series of ledges. And these ledges I was hoping was going to act like a staircase and lead me up eventually to the top, and I couldn't seem to find a safe route to travel. I'd already slipped, and it was enough of a scare for me that I decided to come down. It just wasn't the right day for the climb. It was too late, the dangers were too high, I was by myself, so I used good judgment and turned back. My plan was to knock off some time rather than traversing it again all the way over to the rock rib, then jumping back on the glacier. The glacier was right in front of me, and I thought, if I fall, I'm gonna boot ski it down.
He decided not to take out his ice axe or put his crampons back on so he could slide if he had to.
I was at the very top of the glacier, looking out to make sure there were no crevasses. And the angle that I was at, I couldn't see any crevasses. And I do remember seeing the 2 or 3 big crevasses that I'd passed earlier, but I couldn't remember exactly where those were. And that was my mistake, because it was the angle of the glacier was hiding the angle of the crevasse. And I remember thinking, well, if you fall, and I fell. And I started sliding feet first, out of control.
Ted Porter was an experienced hiker, but when he attempted to descend a glacier, he lost his footing and started sliding out of control.
Couldn't stop myself. I tried as hard as possible, digging in the heels of my boots, digging in my ski poles, and I was just barreling down the glacier. I thought everything was going to be okay, and this huge crevasse just appears. That made my stomach drop.
He smashed into the front wall of the crevasse and dropped 40 feet.
It didn't feel real. It felt like I was in one of those dreams, truly that you just want to wake up out of. And then the pain. And the pain was undeniably terrible. I knew that I was in bad shape. Really bad shape.
Ted was paralyzed with pain and quickly realized he was in desperate straits.
I've always had a question of, if you're facing a life and death situation, who would you say goodbye to? And I found out. And I found out the hard way.
Mom and Dad, I fell in a crevasse. My back is killing me. I'm still alive.
Survivors of horrific accidents share a unique bond, but each experience is different. Craig DeMartino met up with Ted to hear firsthand more about those first terrifying moments.
You're alone. You realize I'm stuck, and you made an incredibly powerful video.
Yeah, I didn't really see a way to get out of the crevasse at that point. I knew I had a serious injury. I didn't know exactly to the extent of what it was, but I took that video as a goodbye video. So I thought that somebody would find that eventually, you know, search and rescue, or whoever came across it at some point, you know, hoping that my family would know what had happened to me.
Because you're close to your family.
Super close to my family, yeah.
I'm still alive. You guys, if I don't make it out, I love you. I'm not kidding, this is no joke. Okay.
When you were down, you were alone the whole entire time. What were you feeling like, being alone?
You know, I mean, it's hard to describe, but it was probably the most lonely feeling I've ever had in my life. You know, I knew nobody was around, and it was up to me to get myself out of that situation.
Now in survival mode, Ted looked around to see if he could map a path out.
I'd had no real technical ice climbing experience, but I did see one portion of the front crevasse wall that wasn't completely vertical. And when I saw that, as I lay there, I looked at it, I zeroed in on it, and I knew that if I had a chance to get out, that was it.
Pain racked his body as he put on his crampons. Slowly, he stood and made his way along the crevasse wall.
I had one ice axe, and with that, I reached up on the ice, up on the crevasse wall, and I threw my axe in. And with my left hand, I clawed at the crevasse wall to try to get any kind of traction to help me get out of there. And I started kicking my way up with my crampons. My concern was, since I didn't have two ice axes, when I took out one ice axe to reach higher, that I was gonna fall back. So I put my face into the ice, and you know, when you ice climb, you're usually just kind of like this. I was in it. I was pressed up against the ice.
Ted inched upward, fighting the blinding pain. This wasn't the climb Ted expected to do this day, but it would be the one that would matter the most to the rest of his life. Ted Porter has fallen into a deep crevasse and severely injured his back. Now he's desperately trying to climb up the icy wall.
I pulled my body out, and I was in the fetal position because I was in such bad pain, and with my ice axe in the snow to hold me. I surveyed the rest of the glacier at that point to see where I could get up and walk off, you know, walk across the glacier. And right below me was another huge gaping hole, even bigger than the one I just fell in. And I remember thinking, if I fall here again, I'm gonna fall right back in that crevasse, and we're gonna start this whole process over again. And that was so scary too. And to not fall in that hole, I crawled on my side about 8 to 12 feet in order that I could get around this next crevasse below me. So if I fell, I'd slide past it and not right into it. I remember thinking, don't fall here. Don't fall here.
Ted inched past the next crevasse and struggled to his feet.
I was in bad shape. I still didn't know the severity of my injuries, of course. I'm by myself. I'm looking around for anybody. Nobody's there. And so I knew I had to make it down to Gunsight Lake, where I had seen people camping there, and I was hoping that they would still be there if I was able to get down there.
He made it off the glacier and headed for the lake. He now faced 3 more miles over rough terrain, grizzly country, and during feeding season.
There's always the danger of grizzly bears in Glacier National Park, always. But on the way up on the trail, at the beginning of my climb, I saw 2 fresh grizzly bear scats, and so I knew they were in the area. And on the way down, when I already had my injury, I pulled out my bear spray because I was coming across the part of the trail where I'd seen the grizzly bear scats earlier the day. So I'm walking with a serious injury, didn't know exactly what it was at that time, down the trail with an ice axe and with grizzly bear spray. And I remember thinking, you know, if I run into a grizzly bear now, this is just, it's been that kind of day.
A few hours later, the meadow around Gunsight Lake came into view, along with a group of campers.
I remember I asked them, I said, could you help me? And they said, what happened? And I said, I fell into a crevasse on the Jackson Glacier.
Crevasse? What? Yeah.
You know, and I've walked down here to try to get help.
I need some food, some water.
Okay. What do you plan to do?
I said, I plan on hiking back another 6.2 miles to the road to try to get help.
I don't think that's a good idea.
Look, why don't you come sit by the tree and we can talk about it?
Okay. Okay.
What were you feeling when you saw them?
I knew that I wasn't in the clear yet, but it was a huge relief just to have somebody to talk to and to tell somebody what happened, and hopefully they could help me. And just seeing another human was pretty awesome at that point.
Right.
You know, somebody around to help you out.
Right.
Eric, Justin.
As luck would have it, Ted had walked into a campsite that had not 1, but 2 people trained in emergency first aid, Justin Ricks and Eric Harness.
Let's get this backpack up. He had probably the best first aid care he could have in the wilderness with 2, you know, non-professional experts out there.
Easy.
Myself trained for years and years in first aid, and Justin's been training for years and years in first aid and search and rescue.
You guys said he fell?
I just couldn't imagine like him being in a better position, you know, being the circumstances as they may.
What's your name?
Ted.
Ted, do you know what date it is?
Yeah, September 2nd.
Eric and Justin knew the first thing they had to do was evaluate Ted's condition, and to do that, they had to get his story.
It just was a little amazing. Is this guy for real? Did this guy just walk off of that mountain and come down here? And is he for real? He just fell in a crevasse. It was just like, okay, seriously?
Ted, where's the pain coming from?
My lower back.
All right, Justin, what we gotta do, we gotta straighten his legs. Just hang tight, Ted.
Okay.
Ted's completely coherent. And it was bizarre because that was the first thing I thought. This guy he fell 40 feet. He's got to have a concussion.
Ted, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the pain?
I got 4.
Me and Justin kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, is this a 4 now? But is this going to be an 8 in 2 hours? Is it going to be, you know, a 6? Is it going to stay a 4? We don't know. We really didn't know because of the adrenaline too.
All right.
And that was sort of your worst fear as a first responder, especially in the wilderness. There's really nothing you can do.
Everyone seemed to contribute items to make Ted more comfortable.
We're gonna find a way to get you out of here, okay?
Okay.
While they decided what to do about getting him out of there. They knew no one could hike out for help that night.
There was a high threat of grizzly bears in the area, and it just wasn't safe.
There was one other option, activating a spot satellite receiver Eric's brother had brought along. This device could send a message to a search and rescue coordination center. It might bring in rescuers that night, or they too would decide it was too dark and dangerous. Activating it could also incur a high financial cost for the rescue.
Hey, Ted. So
when we offered it to him and he explained the consequences of what was going to happen, he said, you know what? I'm comfortable with your decisions. You know, I think you guys are doing a great job, and I don't think I need it. I think I can wait.
Yeah, let's see if we can get you a little bit more comfortable then.
Okay. Yeah.
Throughout the night, I didn't sleep a wink. I knew my situation. I just couldn't get any sleep at all. I tried. The pain was so bad.
Just as the sun was barely beginning to rise, 3 of the campers started the 6-mile hike to the road.
At about 6 or 6:30, when the 3 people hiked out to go get me help, this lady, Janet, she came over to sit with me. And she sat with me for hours on end. And she held my hand.
I know it's been a rough go, but I want you to know we've got people out there getting you some help, okay?
Okay. That'd be nice.
We should be back soon with help.
I think it was about 10 o'clock. I heard the helicopter rotors come in. I was super excited. I had a feeling it was for me. And it circled, then it circled again, got lower, and it circled again. And Janet looks at me and she goes,
"That's for you."
Ted Porter severely injured his back, falling into an icy crevasse. Now he's walked miles in excruciating pain and survived the longest night of his life.
I made the mistake of wearing my watch throughout the night. I checked every 20 minutes. It felt like it was 2 hours, and it was just 20 minutes here, 10 minutes here. Time stood still that night.
But help had finally arrived.
That's for you.
We've been hearing helicopters the whole time we were in Glacier for the tourists, but we knew that this one was for us. You know, you could just tell.
The medics prepared Ted for the flight to the hospital in Kalispell and instructed Eric and the others how to load him into the helicopter.
Get around the front, get you on the feet down here. We gotta be together and we gotta move it. Be gentle. 1, 2, 3. Oh, easy. Oh, all right. Oh. Keep down 3 up. Okay, Ted. 1, 2, 3. Oh.
So after the helicopter left, one of the odd things was, you know, as we're sort of like breathing this sigh of relief, it swings out above the glacier and over the mountain. It was like, okay, that's kind of symbolic.
At the hospital, Ted was told he had 2 injured vertebrae, one fractured and the other smashed. A bone fragment was pushing into his spinal cord, and if they didn't operate immediately, he could be paralyzed. After Craig DeMartino's fall, he was pretty much told the same thing. How did Ted take the news?
What are you feeling at that time? How are you even addressing that?
You can't believe it. It seems surreal, but it's true. That you go from walking 1 minute to not walking the next, and it's a really hard thing to listen to.
Were you telling your family at that time? Were you talking to them on the phone saying, oh my gosh, this is what's happening?
Yeah, I told my family that if I didn't get the emergency surgery, that partial or full paralysis was a huge possibility, and they were just as scared for me as I was.
Right.
So it was also surreal. It's also quick, you know, how fast it happened, from walking completely fine to not walking at all.
Right.
The delicate back surgery was a complete success, and Ted's mother and girlfriend were by his side during his recovery in the hospital. After the hospital, Ted moved back to his parents' home for 3 months of rehabilitation. Today, he continues to work on regaining full mobility without pain.
From the very beginning, Ted faced this accident with a drive. One of the things he said in the very beginning was, I need to get back to my family. I have more life to live. And I think that's what really made him propel himself out of the crevasse and down the hill. I think that's really, really what did it.
Well, the doctors say I'm one of the luckiest guys they've ever met. They say that based on what happened to me, that I'm lucky to be alive. And not only lucky to be alive, but lucky to be walking. The alternative for me was, if I didn't get out of there, I was gonna die. So for some reason, luck, drive, you know, whatever you want to call it, something got me out of that crevasse. I didn't want to die.
Staying calm and focused enabled Ted to keep going when most people would have given up. I know from my own survival experience, being able to break things down into single tasks kept my mind from panicking. Ted was able to solve one problem at a time and keep his pain from overcoming him. He wasn't ready to die that day. His was a fight to survive. Hi, I'm Craig DeMartino. Canyoneering in the rugged terrain of southern Utah was an adventure Justin and Jeremy Harris had wanted to do for a while. The narrow canyons would be a challenge for them, but they were both up for a day of serious hiking. When Justin dropped 20 feet off a boulder to the canyon floor, shattering his leg, their adventure turned into a survival nightmare.
Utah's San Rafael Swell. 2,000 square miles of spectacular panoramas. It's a remote, surreal, almost alien landscape. For eons, the relentless runoff has cut through this soft Coconino and Cedar Mesa sandstone and created a maze of deep slot canyons. The twisting canyons drop hundreds of feet below the surface of the mesa and meander for miles. Some are so narrow that a canyoneer, as these hikers are called, has to turn sideways to slip between the steep walls. It was the captivating serenity and the challenge of exploring the mysterious canyons that drew hikers Justin Harris and his younger brother, Jeremy.
I always look forward to camping trips, hiking around, and just exploring the mountains and the beauty of the area that we have here.
Hey. Hey, Justin, it's Jared. How you doing?
Hey, you still up for camping this weekend?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So I think we'll go to Baptist Draw.
Justin and I did a lot of climbing and canyoneering.
It's about 7-8 mile stretch. And I'm gonna bring the rappel gear because we'll have to go down some pour-offs.
Oh, that'd be great. We've never been there.
We have to go this weekend before winter settles in.
Canyoneering in the desert has been somewhere to escape to and a place to connect.
In 2003, the 2 Utah natives were living on opposite ends of the state. For months, they had been talking about getting together for a weekend of hiking and climbing. Unfortunately, work schedules and family obligations confounded their efforts to reconnect, but the brothers kept trying.
We just couldn't put the weekend together until late November, and it was later than we wanted to go, but we knew if we didn't go, that weekend it wasn't going to happen.
On a November Friday, the pair reunited in the south central part of Utah, at the edge of the San Rafael Swell.
This is absolutely beautiful, Jeremy. It's nice. How much farther do you think before we get there?
They drove 2 more hours through Goblin Valley and into the heart of canyon country to Baptist Draw and the mouth of Chute Canyon.
It's just a beautifully clean, pristine area. There's no telephones, there's no gas stations, there's no hospitals. It's miles to anything.
It's cold, man. Let's get that one by your foot.
Their plan was to camp at their truck Friday night, then Saturday morning, climb down into the canyon.
What time you want to go tomorrow? I guess it depends if you want to stay next night. Yeah, you got time.
They'd hike 8 or 9 miles straight out of the canyon, then circle back and return to the truck by Saturday night.
I was looking forward to it, exploring a new canyon and just having fun with my brother.
It was extra cold for November. The temperature was near freezing.
Holy cow. Yeah. All right, here's my jacket. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Go down and around there.
Their trek started with an 80-foot rappel down into the canyon.
Whoa, you all right, buddy?
Yep, I'm good. Good, got it.
Since they had rappelled down into the canyon, the only way out was to move forward. Jeremy's trail notes showed a narrow chute that led out of the canyon a few miles ahead.
The canyon was very narrow. If you can imagine standing next to a skyscraper and just putting your back to the building and looking up.
Look at this.
That's kind of what it was like, but you'd have another building in front of you too, right there.
All right, let's keep moving.
At points along the path, the brothers ran into sudden drops called pour-offs. Some dropped off dramatically, 20 to 30 feet at a time. There were also large boulders that jutted out,
pretty tight,
called chokestones, that blocked their way, slowing their progress.
How's it look?
It's not easy hiking at all. It's very difficult and tough to scramble through those areas.
How far along are we?
We're only gone about a quarter of the way.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Well, let's get moving. We gotta get here before dark.
Okay.
The temperature was dropping fast, and they knew they needed to be out by nightfall. They began to rush as Jeremy leaped down a drop-off.
Damn it!
He got soaked in an icy pool. Craig met up with Justin and Jeremy in Utah's canyon country and heard their story firsthand.
Jeremy hits the water, and he's now wet, and you guys are way in the backcountry.
Absolutely.
What were you thinking at that point?
We're already way behind.
Yeah.
It's way below freezing.
We gotta pick up the pace. We gotta get you back to camp. I'll get you warmed up.
Hiking out of the canyon and back to the truck as quickly as possible was now the top priority.
So Justin and I had picked up the pace. We came to another drop. This one was probably 25 feet.
What do you think? Should we drop a line?
No, we don't have time. We gotta down climb. Come on.
So I took the lead and climbed up over the top. And as I put my back towards the rock and started looking for handholds and places to put my feet and move down this rock, I lost my footing.
Jeremy grabbed Justin's hand, but felt him slip away. The crack of a breaking bone could be heard throughout the canyon.
It felt like a bomb had just gone off in my head.
I've never heard anyone scream in agony like that in my life.
Jeremy knew Justin was seriously hurt, but until he could get to him, he had no idea his brother's injury was life-threatening. Justin Harris and his younger brother Jeremy had finally gotten away for a weekend of canyoneering in south central Utah.
You gotta down climb. Come on.
As Justin worked his way over a boulder, he lost his footing.
As Justin loses his footing and goes, he hits the ground, breaks his leg.
You know he's broken it.
Oh yeah, he's screaming in agony. I've never heard anyone wail like that.
His left leg had been smashed by the impact against the rock. Justin's screams echoed through the canyon. The brothers' desperate situation was one that Craig recognized all too well. Back in 2002, Craig, a very skilled climber, was working his way up a steep rock wall with a buddy in Colorado. A miscommunication sent Craig crashing nearly 100 feet to the ground. The impact destroyed bones in his feet and eventually cost Craig his right leg.
He was yelling like you've never heard someone yell.
And he's just screaming, and so I started yelling at him.
What were you yelling?
Stop screaming, and finally he stopped. So I just asked him, do you really believe in God? And he said, yeah, I do. I said, will you say a prayer then? And he said a prayer.
Please protect my brother and myself.
For some reason, everything kind of calmed down.
Right.
And then I climbed down.
Talk to me, brother.
It's broken. I felt it snap.
Okay, I'm gonna look, okay?
Yeah.
And we kind of assessed the situation.
Jeremy pulled up Justin's pant leg.
How's it look?
It's pretty swollen, man.
His left shin bone had multiple breaks and was rapidly swelling up.
You're gonna have to sit tight.
What neither brother knew was that the swelling was a sign of internal bleeding, which was life-threatening.
Was that just almost debilitatingly terrifying for you?
It took me about a minute to actually grasp what had just happened.
Right.
And how serious our situation just got.
Yeah.
Think about how tough it was to just get to that point in the canyon. I may have just, ended it for both of us.
Can you carry me out?
There's no way I can carry you out of here.
What are we gonna do?
There was only one other option.
It's still light out. I'll climb through, I'll get help, and I'll bring help back.
There's no way you can get out by dark.
Have to, okay?
We made the decision that I was going to leave him and go get help.
Give me your pack.
So we went through all of our provisions.
They divvied up their food, leaving most of what little they had with Justin.
No.
You're gonna get cold, you're not moving. I'll be moving, okay? I'll be all right. I'm giving my best.
I don't need
You gotta stay warm. You're just sitting still, I'm moving.
All right.
I'll be moving.
Since Justin was wet and immobile, staying warm was critical in now below freezing temperatures.
Yeah.
Hypothermia and frostbite were very real threats.
You get cold, this is here, okay?
Okay.
In my mind, we may never see each other again.
That was a real possibility.
Yeah.
They found their camera at the bottom of the pack.
I'm gonna take a picture.
You guys took time to take a picture of each other. What were you thinking? Like, why would you do that?
In case either one of us didn't make it out, or both of us didn't make it out, that here was our last moments, our last day. There'd be a record, there'd be something left behind. We just knew we had to.
Here we go, okay?
I love you.
I love you.
We told each other that we loved each other, that we'd be strong and we'd be able to get out of this. I just told him, think happy thoughts, you'll be fine. But I remember him taking a few steps and going farther down the canyon from me, and then he went around this turn in the canyon and he was gone.
Now Justin was alone in the frigid, dark canyon. He had no idea if he would survive his injury, or even if his little brother would survive the difficult solo trek for help. The brothers' happy reunion had become a horrible nightmare. A canyoneer's worst nightmare, slipping off a high ledge
Justin!
and shattering a leg. Justin Harris and his brother Jeremy were always close, but now Justin's life was in his brother's hands. Justin can't walk, so it's up to Jeremy to go it alone through 4 miles of a winding canyon in increasing darkness to get help.
Now you're alone in the canyon.
It was absolutely terrifying. We're out there in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles from anyone. Your kid brothers tags along with you and follows you, and now he left me there, and he had to go on and and go for help. It was life or death now. You don't want to think that I've got a 5% chance of living now, or that it would be a miracle if I made it out of there.
Right.
You want to think that you're still in control, that this is what we're going to do, this is the plan, everything's going to work out, and you try to focus on that, but in the back of your mind, I was thinking I might die right here.
The plan was simple enough. Jeremy would hike out, return to their pickup, and call for help using the cell phone they had left in the truck.
We calculated that it would probably take him, you know, another 4 to 8 hours to get out of the canyon, depending on how much more water, how many more obstacles there were, and then maybe another 4 or 6 hours for help to be contacted and come back and start trying to get to me.
Keeping warm was imperative, but next to impossible in the freezing temperatures. And then there was the internal bleeding Justin couldn't do anything about, causing his muscle compartments to swell, which were beginning to restrict blood flow to other parts of his body.
If I could make it through the night, then I would have a really good chance of living and getting out of that canyon. And so that was my goal, that was my plan.
Jeremy hiked and climbed his way through the maze of boulders, chokestones, and pour-offs.
The canyon had been pretty dry so far. But right as I walked around the corner, it was pool after pool after pool after pool after pool. And so I'm swimming. It got between 10 and 15 below that night. So I was severely hypothermic and hallucinating as well. I was screaming at God, hoping someone would come and help me.
Justin, meanwhile, tried to stay warm. He flapped his arms, made windmills, whatever movements weren't too painful to keep his blood flowing. Hour after hour, he watched his leg blow up like a misshapen balloon.
So I pulled up my pant leg and I looked at my leg to see what was going on there. And I noticed that there were these big blisters all over my leg, and they were popping, and there was sort of a yellowish fluid that was coming out of those blisters and running down my leg, and I knew it wasn't a good sign.
Exhausted from hiking and fighting off the cold, Jeremy made steady progress on his way out of the canyon. Until he realized he was in real trouble.
I had a pocket that my trail notes were in, and the pool that I went through, the trail notes washed out, so I was kind of like winging it. So I continued down the canyon. I went down 5 different pour-offs and got to one pour-off that was about, I don't know, probably 60 feet down. I realized I'm in the wrong place, and I need to go back up canyon.
He didn't remember a drop that high on his trail notes. Jeremy had gone too far. He must have walked past the turn that would have led out of the canyon. But where? How long ago did he pass the turn? Jeremy had no choice but to backtrack to find the path. His mistake would waste valuable time and exhaust what little energy he had left to save his brother. While down climbing a high ledge, Justin Harris slipped and shattered his leg. So his brother Jeremy went for help. On the verge of hypothermia, after hours of hiking, Jeremy had lost his way in the dark as he searched for the exit out of the deep Utah Canyon. At stake was his brother's life. Now he had to backtrack up the canyon, costing him precious hours, in order to hopefully recognize the right turn.
So 5 different pour-offs I had to climb back up. One took me many attempts. Gave up. Try again. It took me like several hours to get back up.
As Jeremy retraced his steps in search of the path that he had missed, Justin's condition became grave.
The middle of the night, it was so cold that I felt like my skin was freezing, and I started thinking about, frostbite, and I need to do something else to warm my body up. So I would try to do some arm circles. I would try to move my good leg, eat a little bit, anything that I could do to warm myself up.
The freezing temperatures and soaking wet clothes were getting to be too much for Jeremy.
All that was in my mind was to save my brother. I gotta save my brother. And so it was really hard to take a break, but I had to warm up. It was so cold that I had to lay like right in to the fire, and I fell asleep, and I woke up and I was on fire.
He beat out the fire, dried his boots, and resumed the frustrating search for a way out of the canyon.
I had no water at all. I put snow into my water bottle and kept it under my armpit to try and melt it. But that didn't work at all. It was just one thing after another.
Justin made it through the long, cold night. Sunday morning brought warmer temperatures and a bit of relief. But as the hours went by, hope for a prompt rescue faded.
It's a challenge to stay positive. It's a challenge to stay motivated to get through another 5 minutes or another hour. You start to doubt, and I worried about a lot of things. I worried about Jeremy and his physical limitations and if he was going to be able to get through it. And as the day went on and the light finally made it down into the canyon again about the middle of the day, and then passed over the canyon into the afternoon, and it started getting colder again, that's when I started to think about Jeremy, and I started to wonder if maybe he had had an accident or if he had died that night in the canyon. I remember just feeling really miserable, really angry, thinking how stupid I was. How could I let that happen? I just leaned into the wall and cried for a while.
To better understand their dire situation, Craig DeMartino returned with Justin and Jeremy to those desolate Utah canyons.
Being alone in that kind of a spot is probably pretty scary.
Everything in my body was saying, lay down, go to sleep, just shut down. And I thought about my wife and kids all the time.
Right.
And I knew I had to do everything that I could to get out of there, get back to them, and be a dad.
Justin forced himself to stay awake, checking on his leg that was severely swollen from a compound break in his shin bone, and doing what he could to keep warm.
I started to wonder about shock. I didn't want to start to lose my mental capacity and not know what was going on. So I sat there and I thought about my children's and my wife's names and birth dates. Just repeated that over and over again, and I thought if I could do that 100 times and not forget things, then I was doing fine.
The morning sun brought some relief from the bitter cold.
Hello?
He expected rescuers to arrive by midday.
Hello?
His hope of salvation faded along with the daylight. Dreams of a quick rescue gave way to the nightmare of spending a second night alone in the cold canyon.
I was worried about Jeremy. That's when I started to wonder if maybe he had had an accident or if he had died that night in the canyon. If it's been 24 hours and I haven't heard from anybody, then there's a good chance that he didn't make it out.
Justin had no way of knowing that his brother had in fact made it out of the canyon. From the minute he left Justin, Jeremy struggled for miles over boulders and across freezing pools of runoff water.
No.
At one point, he lost his way and had to retrace his steps. By Sunday morning, he was exhausted, hallucinating and suffering from severe dehydration and hypothermia.
I made it back to base camp. I got in the car and started it and started the heater. Justin had a cell phone there, but it was dead, so I had to charge it. There was no signal at all, zero.
Jeremy climbed atop the truck and got a cell signal, just strong enough to reach the Emery County Sheriff's Department.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
We're up here at Baptist Draw. He fell, he's down in the canyon.
They immediately mobilized the all-volunteer Emery County Search and Rescue Team.
SO 701.
Typically our rescues are slot canyon rescues.
Our ETA, we are 10 minutes out.
They're the most dangerous place I've ever been in my life. It's so remote, it takes a search and rescue team sometimes days to get to people out in that area. It's a very treacherous part of the country, very unforgiving.
Jeremy, how far down there is Justin?
A couple miles in, I don't know.
Can you tell us how long you guys were hiking before he fell?
No, a few hours, I don't know.
Jeremy was just exhausted beyond belief.
Just go look for him. He's out there somewhere. He's alone.
Just relax first. We'll get an ambulance on its way and get you taken care of.
Normally what we do is we would take the person back to where the injured party is, but he was in such a condition, the only thing we could do was have him taken to a hospital.
When I was taken to the ambulance, I was completely depleted. They couldn't even put an IV in me. I was so dehydrated.
Let's split up. We'll work in teams.
Jeremy told the rescuers, as best he could describe, where Justin had fallen.
We decided that we'd have to find out from the top of the canyon where he was down at the bottom.
Justin! Hey, Justin! Oh, Justin!
We could not see the bottom of the canyon.
Justin!
We threw some light sticks down and they just disappeared.
Down in the dark canyon, Justin had no clue yet that a rescue was in the works.
My body was telling me, lay down and go to sleep, but I couldn't. I was too nervous about maybe falling asleep and not waking up.
If he lost his fight to stay awake, if he nodded off, even for a moment, he might not hear the searchers. If he slept now, he'd likely die in the canyon. As soon as they arrived on scene, the Emery County Search and Rescue Team began combing the remote Utah Canyon for the injured hiker.
We started searching the ledges to see if we could hear him and he could talk back to us and we could find where he was.
Unaware that help was in the area, Justin laid shivering in the bottom of the canyon.
I started to hear things out in the distance.
The team hurled M80 fireworks into the canyon to try to wake Justin if he had lost consciousness.
I figured that's either help on the way or I'm hallucinating and I'm near the end.
Rescue teams walked along the edge of the canyon, calling down to where Justin might be trapped.
Oh!
We were pretty excited when we heard that voice.
It was almost unreal that it was actually happening. And they asked how I was doing, and I told them I was cold, got a broken leg.
But I'm doing all right. How's my brother?
How's Jeremy? And they said he made it out. He's at the hospital getting some help, but he's doing okay.
The crew estimated that Justin was nearly 500 feet below the mesa. A few team members began a treacherous rappel down the steep canyon walls.
We had to do 3 rappels in the dark. Couldn't even see the bottom of where we were rappelling.
I'm over here!
I heard them coming for a while, and I knew they were trying to get to me, and I knew it was really difficult.
The descent into the canyon took the rescuers the entire night.
Justin!
Over here!
Oh, I see him. He's right up here.
Diane Chandler, an EMT and a volunteer on the team,
There's not a lot of room.
was one of the first to reach Justin.
Hey, Justin.
Well, when I first saw him, I was pretty excited. It's like, hey, this guy is alive. He's talking to me. He's coherent.
Just relax. Let us take a look and see what we have here.
She pulled my pant leg up, and I think immediately she knew how bad it was.
I tried to school my face not to show the shock when I looked at his leg.
How bad is it?
Let's just focus on getting you out of here right now, okay?
When she wanted to change the subject, I knew that was probably not a good sign.
It was hard, and it was oozing blood and fluid.
Immediately she knew that it was life-threatening.
All right, I'm gonna go let him know we found you.
Take some deep breaths, try to relax.
This is Diane. Go ahead. I'd say due to the epidermal oozing, the location of the break, and the size of his leg, it's gotta be something like compartment syndrome. We need to get him out of here as quickly as we can, okay?
We're looking about 30 minutes.
Copy that.
Justin's leg showed the effects of blood fluid pressure accumulating under the skin around the injury.
Okay.
Hold all the weight.
Called compartment syndrome, the resulting disruption of blood flow can cause critical damage to vital organs of the body.
All right, I'm gonna slide this splint right under right now.
Compartment syndrome is pretty dangerous. Not just risking a limb, but also for the life, because toxins build up into that compartment. If those are released into the body, you can just die from that.
Up top, the rope team began setting up a system to extract Justin.
We started setting our pulley systems and our belay systems up.
Lovely.
It takes a lot of time to do that, especially out in that area. The anchors are really bad. There's not a lot of trees, so we had to drill bolts to make sure our anchors were safe.
As the rescuers rigged the ropes, Diane tried to stabilize Justin.
I remember her trying to give me an IV.
This is frozen solid.
But as soon as she got the lines out, it would freeze because it was so cold. So she sat with me and she talked to me. And we talked about my family. It was so comforting to have her there to take my mind off of what was happening.
Lots of times people think when you get there, all of a sudden it's over. But really, the work has just begun.
I really just tried to focus on the things that I could do. Stay positive, just focus on staying alive.
For the rescuers,
Ready on top? Yeah!
getting Justin out of the canyon alive was a race against time. A race they weren't certain they'd win. Justin Harris had fallen deep into a Utah canyon, shattering his leg.
Over here!
The Emery County Search and Rescue Team reached him and stabilized his injuries. They moved quickly to lift the injured 31-year-old out of the tight canyon.
A lot of loose rock right above Justin that we had to work through.
It was 500 feet straight up a wall, and I was in the basket. Ken was attached to the rope, holding the basket and keeping me from banging against the wall.
We're almost there, man.
Ken was just a rock. He was just amazing.
There were several obstacles we had to overcome. The team on top worked their guts out getting me and Justin up.
From the hospital, Jeremy watched his brother's rescue unfold on live television.
I knew that they were hauling him up the wall, but I didn't know that he had made it up until I saw it on television.
Frigid November temperatures have added to the urgency.
Yeah, Justin, it's your wife.
Hey, Trish.
I was able to tell my wife I loved her and she loved me, and that things were going to be okay.
A life flight helicopter rushed Justin to the Intermountain Medical Center in Salt Lake City. Justin's wife had made her way to the hospital as fast as she could.
Once we got to the hospital, she came in and gave me a big hug and, said something like, "You're so stupid, but I'm glad you're alive."
Where's the kids?
They're fine, they're with my mom.
It was reassuring because when I was sitting in the canyon, I'm thinking about them. They're my motivation to get through this.
Doctors discovered the extent of the fracture and the grave damage done by the compartment syndrome. Damage that looked irreparable. After multiple surgeries, a decision had to be made.
There was no more oxygen getting to my foot, and even after all the surgeries, they just couldn't save my foot. And so I had to make that decision to have half of my lower leg taken off.
A canyoneer's worst nightmare. Slipping off a high ledge and shattering a leg. Justin Harris's long nightmare ended.
Oh, I see him.
When rescuers found him and lifted him 500 feet up from the canyon floor. He was only rescued because his younger brother Jeremy never gave up trying to find his way out of a canyon maze while fighting off hypothermia.
After I got to the hospital, I was able to see Jeremy. It was pretty amazing to look in his eyes and tell him thank you.
I'm serious. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for staying alive.
Thank you for doing everything that you had to do and go through to get out of there, and for not giving up.
I'd be dead if it wasn't for you, man.
Sorry, man.
No.
That time was extremely hard. I felt responsible for what happened. When you feel like you've hurt your brother so bad, it brings you down a lot.
I'm gonna take a picture. Okay.
That night in the canyon, just before Jeremy left Justin to get help, they took a snapshot of each other. They had no idea if they'd ever see each other again.
Remember those pictures I took?
Then, during his visit to Justin's bedside, Jeremy showed him the two images from that night.
He brought the pictures up and showed me the picture of him, and it shows the canyon in the background, and it shows how dark it's getting, and you could really see the fear on his face. Then I looked at the picture of me, and I had this sort of look of misery on my face, like I'm having my worst day. Then I noticed on the side of the picture there was something a little different, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And I thought about that moment that we took that picture, and I thought about how we had this wonderful moment as brothers. And I thought, well, maybe we captured an angel.
It's my guardian angel.
Wow, never noticed that.
That guardian angel may have helped save Justin from the canyon, but it couldn't help save Justin's leg.
We got to the point where there was no blood flow anymore.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that the leg was deteriorating fast. I did some real soul searching and thinking about what that would mean for me as a husband, as a provider, as a father. And I realized that all the things that matter weren't going to change. It's just a leg.
Right.
I'm still here.
It's not Justin, it's a leg.
I'd give the other one to stay alive.
Right.
It's just amazing to have that second chance and still be here.
Not long after the accident, Justin's wife Trish gave him some wonderful news. They were going to have another baby, a girl.
We named her Emery Faith Harris in honor of Emery County Search and Rescue. Life today is great, is challenging. I've learned that sometimes you have to plan a little bit more in advance, and you might have to find a different way to do something, but I found that I can do just about anything I want to do.
So you haven't been like in the climbing setup kind of since that day?
Craig returned with Justin to the remote Utah canyons that he had once enjoyed exploring.
Go right in here and the rope will run nice and smooth, kind of like what you guys did that day. You know, a couple longer rappels, but it'll get you down to the bottom.
And with Craig's guidance, Justin regained something else very important to him. Something that he thought he had lost forever.
Sometimes we go through difficult things, and sometimes there are challenges.
Lean into it.
But if we keep moving forward and we love each other, we'll get through anything.
Woo! To see him do what he does with one leg is amazing. He takes care of everything. He holds it down, and he's only got one leg.
Lovely.
Justin's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
All right. That was great.
Awesome.
Great.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back, my friend. When their bodies started to fail them, both brothers somehow found the inner strength to keep going. They both had some survival training, but perhaps just as important was the love these two brothers had for each other. It made all the difference in their epic fight to survive.
Father-son adventurers trekked deep into the treacherous Alaska wilds.
Cliff areas looked pretty chancy.
Following the rugged trail of the white-coated Dall sheep. Before the hunt is over, one man will witness his son windmilling helplessly through the air from a cliff.
I'm not sure he's going to keep breathing.
His help's coming.
We have a serious situation.
And that man will learn the outer limits of strength, endurance, and commitment of which a father is capable. The spectacular wilds of Alaska's mountains. An ideal place for a hunter to pass from wilderness to wilderness, from one high place to another, in the words of John Muir. But those high places come with extreme risk. A misstep, a patch of ice, or a sliding rock can hurtle a hunter to the bottom of a gorge. Growing up a hunter in Texas, Rick Collins was willing 30 years ago to accept the risks of Alaska for its breathtaking wild spaces, twice as large as those of his native state.
Well, I moved to Alaska in 1983. Been several years, and I haven't grown tired of it a bit yet. And I came because of the outdoor life, mainly hunting, but fishing as well. I like the wilderness situations of being able to get away from the crowds.
It's gonna be a good trip this year, Jake.
Came here mostly for the adventure.
August 18th, 2006. Collins and his 22-year-old son, Jake, his main hunting partner, set off for their favorite Dall sheep hunting area, the sheer cliffs of the Wrangell Mountains. Getting to Dall sheep territory starts with a 6-hour drive across the state from their home in Wasilla. Then, a long slog on ATVs up muddy 4x4 tracks in the late summer thaw.
We started running into muddy conditions, difficulty finding our way through the bogs. We knew early on that we were going to be spending the night somewhere along the trail.
That ought to do, Jake. You got them covered up.
When they have to leave their ATVs, they conceal them to prevent bears from destroying them.
Yeah, the frame of mind to this point is things are going well. We were confident, and our confidence was growing that we were going to be able to find sheep.
A couple of hours after daylight, which here can come at 2 or 3 in the morning, the two are out of their spike camp and beginning to see sheep, and to find a place to set up their spotting scope to glass the far slopes and ridges.
Oh yeah, there's one.
We did convince ourselves that there were some legal rams in the group, although fairly high up the mountain.
The two spot sheep, but not the trophies they're hoping for. But young Jake is ready to settle for something that at least qualifies as a legal ram and wants to strike out after one. And Collins reasons that he might as well.
So I said, well, it's getting late enough in the day now that where those sheep were, I'm sure I can't make it up there and back by dark. So if you want to go get one of those sheep, I'll stay behind down here by the creek and just monitor you through the spotting scope as you go up.
Collins glasses son Jake with his spotting scope as the young man makes the steep climb to get in range of sheep. Collins is confident in his son's abilities, but wants to keep him in sight just in case.
We can tell from the valley floor that the cliff areas along this bottom of this ridge, trying to get up out of the bowl, looked pretty substantial, pretty chancy, but of course from that far away, no real clear indication of how steep they were. And then once he started the climb, I could tell from the way he was having to use both hands, make a few backtracks and try different routes going up, that it was a little more steep country than I had anticipated it was. So I could tell that was pretty tough stuff to get up through. And I was glad I wasn't having to get up through it.
As Collins watches, Jake seems to have spotted something out of Collins's line of sight, and it looks like he might be moving into position for a shot.
I saw him stop. I saw him look over that direction, and I couldn't see any animals over there, but then he started making his way over to that edge of the ridge. And then I saw him getting his gun ready, so I figured there were obviously some sheep over there that looked more attractive to him than the ones we'd seen before. And then eventually he took a shot. When he shot, I saw a sheep appear falling off further to the left across that gorge. And so I knew he had gotten a sheep. I saw him stand up and hold his arms over his head like, yeah, he got one.
Woo! I got it!
It's been a successful hunt for Jake, but the full celebration will have to wait until he finds a way down to the ram and then packs it out. Alaska's strict hunting regulations require that all edible meat must be retrieved from the field for human consumption.
Then he started walking up and down the edge of this cliffs area from this ridge looking for a way down.
Collins grows uneasy as he watches his son trying to find a safe way down the treacherous chutes of the gorge to the sheep.
Yeah, I started getting worried about it because I could see that there was no clear way down for him. I thought he might be considering doing something pretty drastic. And then I see him squat down and obviously take a posture like he's gonna jump. So then I'm really getting worried. Then I see him turn around and face the mountain and grab the ledge. His hand slipped off the ledge and he falls over backwards and disappears out of my sight. The realization came rather sudden that we have a serious situation. I don't know how serious, but I have to get to him.
Jake Collins has fallen, and now his father must draw on a lifetime of outdoor experience and the sheer power of his will to save his son. Hunting on their own, deep in Alaska's Wrangell Mountains, Father Rick Collins has watched his son Jake hurtle off a cliff into a gorge. Now, Rick Collins must find a way to rein in his horror and concentrate on his son. Collins pulls himself together. With 3 hours to nightfall, he has to pack up rescue supplies and climb up to learn his son's fate.
I know it's going to take me a while to get to there. I haven't seen him. I have only my imagination to think about what condition he's in. Don't know if he's got broken legs, broken arms, if he's conscious, if he's not, if he's bleeding, if he's not. No way to know. Just grabbed what I could and started that direction.
Collins is beyond the range of any cell signal. He has no satellite phone or radio to call out on. A more serious hindrance is his age, as he has to drive his 53-year-old legs to carry him up the slopes at top speed.
About every 15 to 30 minutes, I'd have to stop for a rest, and every time I stopped, I'd just start yelling, Jake, I'm headed up there, just in case he was in a position where he could hear me.
The terrain grows only more steep and rugged, but the most difficult and ominous part is the silence. Collins receives no answers to his repeated shouts to his son.
My frame of mind is that if I'm getting close to him, he's probably not hearing me. And if he's not hearing me, it's probably because he's not conscious.
Collins presses on, legs and lungs burning. And then, without warning, he sights his son, lying motionless. Collins plunges into the gorge to reach Jake.
When I got to him, he obviously wasn't conscious. I was talking to him the last 5 feet or so as I approached him. I kind of grabbed his shoulder and said again, Jake, can you hear me? And his eyes opened and he kind of looked up at me, but I could tell there was just a blank stare, no recognition in his eyes. And he just closed his eyes and went back to complete unresponsiveness.
Rick does a quick exam and doesn't feel any broken bones, but Jake's head is full of cuts.
Jake, can you talk to me?
Collins considers trying to carry Jake out, but knows that's impossible in this terrain.
My next option is, am I going to go to camp, to go down there and come back? I know it's going to take me 2 hours, very minimum, because it took me an hour to get to him. I don't think that's a good idea because I'm not sure he's going to keep breathing any length of time, much less for 2 hours. So I decide that, okay, I'm just going to stay with him with what I have.
And what he has is some parachute cloth to make an emergency shelter for his son and him.
So I had this with me that I knew I could cover us up with. I felt like he was off the rocks well enough that it was a good way for us to spend that first night and me to make sure he keeps breathing.
Collins beds down for the night beside Jake under the parachute cloth, sharing his body warmth and making sure his unconscious son continues breathing. Collins has to fight the gusting frigid wind all night, but in the late hours, things take an even more chilling turn.
Then sometime after midnight, he started having seizures where he would start to stiffen up and he would even start to kick his legs up. They would only last about a minute and then go for anywhere from 15 minutes to a half hour before he would have another one, and that continued for a couple hours. I'd say by 3 to 4 in the morning, those had stopped.
Sleep is impossible for Collins as he monitors Jake's condition, and lying beside his son, he searches through the rescue options.
So I'm just thinking back and forth whether I'm going to leave him in the morning or whether I'm going to stay. To some point when I know I have to leave, he hadn't stopped breathing throughout the night, so that's further confirming to me that as soon as it gets daylight, I'm going to need to cover him up as best I can and go find help, because nobody's going to find us where we are.
Rick builds a rock wall to protect Jake from tumbling debris and covers his eyes to shield against scavenger birds. Collins has done all he can. Now he must abandon his son, even if only temporarily, if Jake's life is to be saved. Rick Collins is cheering the sight of his son Jake taking a doll sheep ram when the scene turns to one of horror as he sees his son falling helplessly into a deep gorge. Having stayed with an unconscious Jake through the chill Alaska night, as the injured boy suffers seizures, Collins makes the agonizing decision to leave his son in order to go for help.
Yeah, as you imagine, it's a major decision for me to actually turn my back on him and start to walk away. That was a very difficult thing to do. I knew that was the right thing to do. I was convinced that I had to leave him, but it took me, I think, 3 tries of actually turning around before I actually made myself keep walking away from him.
Rick Collins doesn't have time to look back at Jake. He's got to move as fast as his legs can carry him back to their spike camp, then on to the ATVs in the desperate hope of finding help for his son. An hour later, he reaches their spike camp. Then 2 more hours to the ATVs. But the thawed trail onward is a swamp of mud and muck, and Collins has to winch and muscle a 4x4 out of the bog holes when it gets stuck.
Got stuck 10 to 12 times probably going out, where I had to get off the four-wheeler, then use either the winch or me coaxing the rig along, standing off to the side and using both the engine power and me pulling on it to get it out of the muck.
Finally, Collins reaches his truck. He has a choice of a short trip to an isolated ranger station or a longer ride to an area he remembers seeing rental cabins.
And I decided to take the chance and go with what I was relatively sure there's going to be some form of communication at a lodge. So I head that direction away from the ranger station, and within 3 or 4 miles I see a cabin up ahead, a recreational cabin on the left. So I pull into that cabin, go knock on the door, and somebody answers the door, and I ask if he knows of how I can get in touch with emergency services to ask for a rescue.
Collins' Good Samaritan drives him back to where they can get cell service, and they call an Alaska State Trooper dispatcher in Glen Allen, 100 miles away. The dispatcher puts through a swift chain of calls, and a rescue helicopter is in the air from the coolest National Guard Air Force Base in Anchorage. For more than 24 hours, Jake Collins has lain unconscious after hurtling off a cliff. Now, his father boards the rescue chopper, wondering if they will find his son again before it's too late. For more than 30 grueling hours, Rick Collins has traveled muddy trails in search of help for his unconscious son. Now the rescue has gone tactical as they chopper back in high winds to try to locate the gorge in which the fallen Jake Collins lies.
They gave me a handheld laser light and asked me to point towards the gorge I recognized as the one Jake was in.
The terrain around Jake is too tough for a cable rescue. So Rick Collins and the 2-man rescue team must bail out of the helicopter and reach Jake on foot.
So they decided then that the 2 parajumpers and myself were going to have to get out of the helicopter and hike back to where he was, and then carry him out to a location where he could be retrieved by the cable hoist.
Collins worries that a critical hour has now been added to the rescue effort for his son. Collins presses uphill as fast as he can. But fortunately, one of the parajumpers with him, Red Reddington, takes off at top speed and outraces Collins up the slope.
I think I hear him. He's just over the top.
That was Red, took off in the lead and made his way up, and he was the first one to reach Jake, and heard him breathing against the tarp actually before he got to where you could see him.
Jake! Jake, can you hear me? Jake!
So I probably got up to him 15 minutes or so after he got to him, and he was still in the process of getting the tarp ripped away and evaluating his condition when we got there. But, well, I know he's still alive then, so that was a real relief to hear that he was alive. And as I got up there, I just sat down by Jake as they worked on him and told him I was glad he hung on.
Collins' words are for an unconscious Jake. The young man feels cold to the touch, his breathing labored, and his pulse feeble. Yet he is alive. The 3 men place him on a canvas litter and begin the rush down the slope, back to where the chopper can reach them.
Anchorage Life Flight, 44K32. We're ready for cable. Please lower.
It's full throttle to Providence Medical Center in Anchorage. Jake is barely alive, and he's fallen into a coma. It doesn't look good. But then, 20 days after Jake Collins' fall, a miracle. he wakes up, opens his eyes, and speaks 2 words, hello and mom.
I didn't know I was in the hospital. I didn't know where I was. And I guess I don't know if it was normal or expected, but my senses seem to not be capable of being alert all at the same time. I have a few spotty memories. I can't see anything, but I can hear people talking to me. So I don't know if my eyes were closed. Maybe my vision sense just wasn't working yet. I don't know. I had a traumatic brain injury from the accident, and the part of my brain that was most affected was not what I refer to as the academic side of my brain. It was the motor part of my brain. I couldn't stand, I couldn't communicate very well. It was like being a baby all over again. I was completely helpless. I had to relearn all the functions of being a self-sustaining individual.
Doctors tell Jake a full recovery will take more than 10 years, but it's now just 6 years later. He's married with a family and is a teacher in his home of Wasilla, Alaska. He remembers little about the incident. Jake continues to hunt, and he and his dad have returned to the scene of the accident.
The excuse for me to want to go back was to find my rifle, but I really wanted to go back just because I felt like I had not completed that hunting trip. That was a lot of emotional healing for me and my father. Being back in the same spot, for me, being able to recapture exactly where it was, because my memories of that location weren't great.
I got pretty emotional about going back to the spot. It brought back unpleasant memories for sure for me to be there, but at the same time, I think it was good for Jake to see the spot, kind of to bring a closure to it, to say this is something that happened, the events passed, and I'm moving on with my life. Things are getting better.
Jake Collins well knows he owes his life to his father.
I think my reaction to my dad is gratitude. I think I'm grateful to my dad that I'm here, and grateful to my family for all the support that they gave me for me to have the quality of life that I do now.
Hi, I'm Craig DeMartino. After I nearly fell to my death in a rock climbing accident, I didn't have time to contemplate my life or even ask the question of how or why it happened. I was badly injured, but I wasn't alone. Mike Turner was on a solo hike, and after his accident, was very much alone with his thoughts. One way he tried to understand what was happening was to keep a journal. His words tell the story.
I want to think about nature this trip. Destructive, yet grand, spiteful and gentle. Is it all just as you want it, God? Or is it just random events and we are individually as nothing before the beneficence and destructiveness of nature?
Reverend Mike Turner wrote these words in his journal on the first day of a 9-day, 60-mile solo hike deep into the wilderness of Wyoming's Wind River Range. Mike was an experienced outdoorsman and backpacker, as well as the pastor of the Boone Memorial Presbyterian Church in Caldwell, Idaho.
I think being out without any distractions from the everyday was a way to really look at the magnificence of creation. The Wind Rivers were his very favorite mountains.
It's like a huge wave.
Mark Smith, a family friend, was Mike's frequent hiking companion.
He loved to talk about the Wind River Mountains and the trip he had taken when he was a young man traveling along the Continental Divide. For Mike, the hike was as much about the journey as the destination. It was a wonderful thing to go into the wilderness with him and see the wilderness through his eyes. In Mike's mind, there's a sense of God gave this beautiful thing to us as a gift, but it's also grand, dangerous, and a heck of a lot bigger than us. And that's part of what gives it the beauty.
Mike named his journey Wander in Wonder. It included crossing the Continental Divide twice, traversing a glacier, and reaching 12,000-foot passes. He would then rendezvous with Mark's family, some other friends, and his own wife and kids.
The plan that we set up was that he would go on his own, intentionally to be alone, intentionally to engage in a time of spiritual reflection, meditating, journaling, thinking over the past 10 years, and thinking about the possibilities for the next 10.
Craig DeMartino will often leave his wife in the early morning hours to go off on a rock climb. On this August morning in 1998, Mike set out on his hike.
Was it something you worried about when he left?
We kissed and I said, oh, have a great time. Be safe.
We will.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Come on.
Later that morning, I got a bouquet of flowers sent from him with a little card written in his handwriting. Thank you for letting me live this adventure.
Oh, wow.
Know wherever I go and whatever I'm doing, I'm thinking of you.
Backpacking in a place like the Wind Rivers, where you're one of the most remote areas of wilderness in the lower 48 states. Those are the days when cell phones were still pretty primitive. You better be ready for anything.
Mike spent the first night by Eklund Lake and the second night on a ridge above Island Lake.
Anybody, I think, who would go over that pass and see that view simply had to stop and take it in. He set up his tripod, he framed himself, he had Andy by his side, and he took what was simply a spectacular picture.
The words of his journal clearly show that Reverend Mike Turner was making the spiritual connection he hoped for.
With beauty and peace, you refresh me. And all of it I need. Andy's so joyful out here. A spirit of play, alive to water and squirrels. And sometimes he just sits down so contentedly by me. God bless this trip. May it fulfill your holy purposes.
But then, his idyllic adventure began to take a rugged turn.
For day 3, Mike had ambitious plans. He planned to hike from Island Lake across some 6 miles of Indian Basin. He then would ascend the 2,000 feet to the top of Indian Pass, and as he does so, it's tough going. The air gets thinner, the foliage falls away. It's a real challenge when you get up that high.
Saturday, a very tough day. We would have made it over Alpine Lakes, except halfway down Knife Point Glacier. Andy's feet were obviously bothering him. So we decided to take a longer route, which turned out to be interesting.
At this point, Mike deviated from the itinerary he'd given his family and friends.
On the map, the alternative route that he took seemed very sensible. What he could not have known, taking that route, he ended up moving into an area where few hikers ever go.
We got ourselves stuck on some cliffs and had to take some very steep snow.
The pitches on the glacier were steep, and Mike wasn't carrying crampons or an ice axe. Mike and Andy finally reached a valley of beautiful wildflowers. Exhausted, they set up camp for the night.
We worked hard today, faced danger and risk, played it safe though too, where wisdom called for. I will remember this day.
Sunday for a pastor is a working day, so Mike and Andy hiked on, struggling through even more challenging terrain.
The terrain was largely boulders. It was no simple matter.
Then, Mike jumped from one unstable boulder to another.
Just as his feet went off the edge, the other boulder came down and fell into a pocket between the rocks. It just so happened that the shape of the 2 rocks where his legs were trapped him. They didn't injure his legs, but did create sort of granite shackles.
Sunday. About 2 hours ago, a large rock rolled upon me and trapped my leg. I was very careful, be sure of that. I don't know what I face.
Reverend Mike Turner was backpacking deep in the Wind River Mountains. He had jumped on a loose boulder dislodged another, and now was pinned down by a large rock.
Knowing Mike, he was not going to give up.
All right, gotta get this rock off me.
This was a challenge to be met. This is part of what it means to be in the wilderness.
With his faithful dog by his side, he shifted into survival mode. First, he tried to move the boulder with his hands, but he had no leverage against the 800-pound behemoth. Then he tried to use part of his tripod as a lever.
Come on!
Miraculously, he was able to budge the rock a bit, enabling a little better blood flow to his right leg. He then set up an encampment, keeping everything he had at arm's length.
If you're going to survive, you better marshal your resources well under those circumstances, and Mike, as a good survivalist, figured it out. He wrapped his sleeping bag underneath him, and he jerry-rigged his rainfly to make a tent. He had his stove out next to him. He was marshaling his water supplies, because the worst thing in the world for Mike Turner would be to sit there stuck between rocks, engaged in mindless suffering.
Where are you? Where are you?
Yesterday was an outpouring of emotion. Today I'm more calm. In fact, depressed as I consider the helplessness of my situation. I'm concerned first about losing my legs, second, running out of snow to melt for water, and third, fuel, then hypothermia. I felt so foolish taking this longer pass, so lonely. Who would guess no one has come this way?
The purpose of this trip was isolation. He wanted to get away. He wanted to get to the other side of the divide, both physically and spiritually. It's a great place for somebody who wants to be lost. It's a pretty difficult place for somebody who wants to be found.
There's no way they could miss me in my camp. I've tried to rig a shelter to protect from rain. Today, though, its greatest value is to shade me from the blazing sun.
Mike's body was taking a beating. At this altitude, summer temperatures by day reached 100 degrees. By night, they dropped to just above freezing. 4 grueling days passed, but Mike refused to give up his will to live.
My biggest concern is water. I only have 2 quarts left and a little snow that was between the rocks. The irony is that the lake is only 30 feet away, but I can't get my leg to stretch that long. I am drinking 1 quart today, saving a quart for tomorrow. I'm also saving my urine. I wonder how it'll taste with Crystal Light on Friday.
I made chocolate chip cookies, your favorite. Bet your dad would like some too when we see him.
While Mike remained trapped, Diane and the kids thought of him often as they prepared for their trip to meet him. They had no reason to think he had come to any harm.
There are very practical matters involved when one's in a survival situation. Mike knew number 1 was keep warm, and number 2 is make sure you got water.
With the last of his water gone, Mike tied a rope around his water bottle, along with a pair of pliers for weight. He tossed it out over the rocks, trying to reach the water 30 feet away. Hopefully, he could then pull it back in with some life-saving liquid.
Come on. No.
For 5 days, Reverend Mike Turner had been struggling to stay alive. Trapped and immobilized, his body and mind were failing.
Thursday. Last evening I was getting my bedding set around my feet when I noticed something like a cast on the front of my leg. It was my leg without feeling.
Why don't you care about me?
Mike was a man of God, but he was also very human, scared and suffering.
God is with me, but I'm angry with him. Why this terrible injustice? Or is it the product of pride? God is good. There's always hope in him, in this life and in the life to come. I hope this life, but whatever God desires is fine.
Mike had called on every survival skill he could muster, but the trap was unyielding. His mind began to play tricks on him.
Mike, we are right here. We're with you, Mike.
Dad, it's Katie. I'm right here, Dad.
I awake from a dream with a strong sense of Diane's and Katie's presence.
Everything is going to be okay, Mike.
Only it's just Andy.
Mike had now been trapped for 6 days. No one was looking for him. No one had any reason to yet. On Saturday, Mike's family arrived at the campsite and joined the others in their group to wait for Mike's arrival.
Hey, to see you.
Yeah, you too. Hey, is Mike here yet?
No, he's not here.
He isn't. Well, he's supposed to be here, so he'll be here shortly.
Okay.
All right.
We got into Dad's Lake and really expected Mike to come in.
Unlike most ministers I've ever known, Mike was always on time. The idea that Mike would miss a rendezvous was something that was hard to fathom. Not only that, it was kind of irritating. And every time we saw somebody coming down the trail, we hoped.
Hey, Daddy. He'll be along shortly. Come on.
Mike was 6'6", hard to miss him.
And then our hopes were dashed. So many emotions swarmed around us. There was still that irritation, but slowly that irritation turned more to fear.
Where do you think he might be, Mark?
We do have a phone number up at the top of this map for search and rescue.
We kind of looked at the maps, which had information about search and rescue on them, but fully expecting he would come in the next day on Sunday.
The hours dragged on. Saturday night turned into Sunday.
Where he started.
He was supposed to come up here around Island Lake, right, Mark?
Don't believe I ever thought Mike was lost.
Very familiar with this terrain.
I couldn't imagine that anything had actually happened to Mike. He was just too good.
I actually believe he got hung up over in here somewhere.
He understood the backcountry too well. His survival skills were too strong. He must be, as he did sometimes, getting caught up and getting just the perfect shot with his camera.
Monday morning, 9 days after Mike's accident, a massive search and rescue effort was launched.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 people came out to help with the search in one way or another.
Everyone played a role. They had his original itinerary as a place to start.
Yeah, is this Mr. June? Were you at Wind River Range this weekend?
The kids called every hiker on the trailhead logs, looking for any information. But no luck.
Next one.
Mike Turner had now survived far longer than seemed possible.
God will make a way, either earthly or heavenly. If this doesn't work out for my earthly salvation, I shall so miss watching and being part of the steps of the next years. I hope they're great, whether I see them on earth or watch you, in love and understanding, as someone who can't take his eyes off you. I love you all. God bless you. I'm praying to be with you soon.
Somewhere in the course of writing the journal, he somehow knocked it off the rock or something and it fell down to where he couldn't reach it. So he couldn't write in it anymore. And he began to write on anything he could. So again, one of those interesting situations calling for ingenuity.
See journal down to my right in the rocks. Getting lower. Thought I would have been found yesterday. I'm in an easy sight. All day, night, I hear helicopters. Pray they found lost person too.
As his handwriting deteriorates, the circumstances are taking their toll.
Andy is so faithful. He barks for a rock slide. So sorry I brought him. I am ready to die, except for missing my family. I will trust in God. Though he will slay me, yet I will trust him. Fill me with peace, Lord. May the conditions not change my love for you.
A person trapped in the mountains might survive 2 nights, but usually not much more than that. And ultimately, We had to realize after a while that it was a recovery effort. It wasn't a search and rescue effort anymore.
Everyone was looking for Reverend Mike Turner in the Wyoming wilderness. 5 days after the search was officially called off, hikers found the beloved family dog, Andy.
Hey, look at that dog. Hey, buddy. I think that's the dog from the poster.
It is the dog from the poster.
Come here, buddy. Hey.
He was by himself, and so they lured him with granola bars and brought him out with them.
A new effort was launched with the dog in the lead. 31 days after Mike was trapped, but before this group would reach Mike, a lone hiker did.
Hey, how you doing?
What I've heard is that he saw Mike from a distance and hollered and didn't get a response. And he had seen the posters at the trailhead, so he knew that somebody was missing. Mike's body was decomposed badly enough that we didn't have an option to bury him, so he was cremated.
On the first year anniversary of the day Mike was to complete his solo hike, his family and close friends gathered.
Decided that we wanted to go scatter some of the ashes there because that was such a place of love for him. It was really special to carry Mike's ashes on my back.
We went to this spectacular field of wildflowers on the edge of Island Lake.
Sat in the meadow and had a service, and then at the end passed around a bag with Mike's ashes in it and spread them to the winds.
I turned around and I saw this beautiful lake, beautiful young Katie Turner standing on the edge of the lake, pouring out of this plastic bag the ashes of her father strewing out in the wind. I'll never forget it. Suffering does not have the last word. Ultimately, suffering can be redeemed. And Mike, in his own weird way, experienced the redemption of his suffering in his own reflections.
Fading to nothing. So skinny. Thought I would be found by second Tuesday. Boulder wedges me in. Maybe death.
His fighting for survival, the way his thoughts focused in on what was really important at the time when he was facing the grittiest questions of all, that means something very powerful to me.
Love, Dad, Mike.
It says, love, Dad, Mike, and then there's a message over here also to his mom, love you dearly, Mom.
Now, all these years later, what is it like to have his words with you?
Reading the whole journal, it does show that there's peace. It helps so much in being able to understand what he went through.
He struggled. I mean, he was very honest about that.
He was honest in the struggle. He didn't like what was going on with him.
Right.
You figure out in that what you're going to believe and think and have those questions. He went through it and was able to say what he still believed. And that was very helpful. And it was Mike. Yeah.
Mike left this world as the result of a close encounter with gravity and granite. These two things had an unforeseen consequence on a man who questioned that fate, but ultimately made peace with his maker across the days he remained trapped. Mike's journal is a rare and precious document that will go on teaching his family, friends, and all of us how to live, love, and never give up that fight to survive.